Hello everyone, it's Friday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Illegal streaming website Noonoo TV became controversial as it streamed both domestic and foreign content from paid streaming services such as Netflix for free right after they were released. A newly created organization formed by Korean broadcasting companies, streaming services, and so on filed a complaint against this website, claiming this illegal service has done a great deal of harm to the industry. The website announced recently that it would delete all Korean content from the site, but concerns still linger as there is no definite way to prevent illegal streaming websites like this from attracting viewers. How much harm has this website done, and how should websites like this be regulated? For an in-depth analysis, we welcome Jason Bechervaise, film critic and visiting professor at Korea University. Professor Bechervaise, welcome.
Hello, it's great to be here.
And we also have Heo Jong, an attorney at law from Jipyong LLC, on the line. Mr. Heo, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm also glad to be here too.
All right. Now, first question to you, Jason. Before we get into the specific details, I'd like to know what this Noonoo TV is and what has made this so controversial.
Yeah, essentially, this is an illegal streaming website. It was set up in 2021, and it's been very successful, so much so that many domestic players here in Korea, the broadcasters, SBS, NBC, KBS, along with the streaming services, TV and Kuban Play, they basically come together to launch this, file this complaint to try and bring down this website because, well, at least try and remove their content from the website because it's free content. So when you've got free content available on a legal website, obviously, as a content provider, you're spending millions of dollars on content, and it's basically being stolen, put onto this other website, right. And they're generating revenue through advertising, and it's not good for the industry, and I think it's testament to their collective endeavor to try and do something about it that this has happened very, very quickly. So I think in that sense it's good that the content is being deleted, but clearly there are concerns because Korea has long had a battle when it comes to piracy. This is not a new thing. The industry's changed, of course, so we're now in this kind of this streaming era. So the content of piracy, or the quality of piracy rather, is actually quite good because they can just take it from one streamer and put it on their website. Whereas, if you've got a video camera in a cinema and the quality is not very good. So people, are keen to watch films, in the cinema, in all its glory, so to speak. And then, later on, the piracy problem still exists, but the films or the content's already been released in cinemas, so that the companies have therefore generated at least some revenue, in many cases a lot of revenue. But the thing is with this website, it's taking content from streaming services the content that's been dropped on their services, and so it's luring viewers from their streaming services, and therefore they're losing money and they're having to do something about it. So that's essentially what's happened.
Right. Now, Mr. Heo, Noonoo TV, like our professor said, began in 2021, and ever since, the Korean Communications Commission has repeatedly tried to block the URL only to fail. Now, how has Noonoo TV evaded the crackdown up until now?
Yeah, well, the Korean Communications Commission has taken enforcement actions to block the access to Noonoo TV's URL over 20 times since October 21st, 2020. These actions were done by requiring internet service providers, so-called ISPs, to block the website. The ISPs are the corporations providing telecommunication networks like SKT, KT, or LGU+. However, the illegal streaming service by Noonoo TV has not been perfectly controlled. Rather, the infringement has continued up until now, despite the government actions. ISPs are installing blocking equipment into international gateway networks to disconnect illegal websites, but Noonoo TV has taken technical measures to circumvent those kinds of restrictive actions. They had contracted with contents delivery network providers, so-called CDNs, to replicate the legal websites on cache servers opened in Korea. Those replicated URLs on domestic cache servers do not pass through the blocking equipment installed in the international gateway networks. This sort of blind spots bypassing the blocking measures. With this technical measure, Noonoo TV was able to bypass the government's regulatory actions.
Right, so though there are many efforts made, they could not put the Noonoo TV under the control. Now, Professor, to tackle this issue, Korean broadcasting companies, streaming services, movie producers, and distributors formed a new organization called the Alliance for Protection of Videogram, or so-called the AVP. And according to this organization, this illegal streaming site was responsible for content providers losing around 4.9 trillion Korean won, that is like around 3.7 billion US dollars. And to what extent are Korean providers suffering, and how are many illegal streaming websites negatively impacting this content industry?
Yeah, it's useful to put it in context here, actually, because we are in the middle of streaming wars, and it's incredibly heated. Overheated, in fact. You've got all these streaming services pumping a lot of money into content. You're talking millions of dollars. So Netflix, TVing, you've got Disney Plus, and they're all competing against each other following the success of, series such as Squid Game and various other shows that are doing extremely well. The Glory is another one, for example. And so, they're funding a lot of content, and it's very, very expensive. And so it's actually quite risky as a result, because it's overheated, very, very competitive. And so they're trying to ensure that they don't lose revenue. So they've got battles on several fronts. They've got the domestic streamers, then they've got the international streamers, and then you've got these illegal players. Now, the thing is with the illegal players, if the domestic players and also the international players come together to try and push out the illegal players, then that can be a very successful strategy, which is what's happened here with the domestic streaming services. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Korea's long had a battle when it comes to piracy. So in the United States and certainly in the UK, when a film was released, in cinemas, and then it'd be released on DVD, for example, so physical media. So that's another way studios or distributors can generate money through content. Now, in Korea, actually, while video rentals are incredibly popular and significant in the 80s and 90s, with the emergence of the internet in the 90s, actually downloading content has been very, very popular in Korea. People still go and watch it in the cinema, but after the cinema, we got VOD now, and now streaming platforms. But for many years, there was lots of people viewing content through downloading it illegally. And it wasn't really being tackled. Everyone was acknowledging the problem, but it wasn't really being tackled. So it's interesting now the industry's in a place where you've got we're in the streaming wars or the streaming kind of ecosystem, and illegal piracy is proving to be an extremely big problem. So the streamers are coming together because they're losing a lot of money, partly because they're competing against each other, but also because you've got these illegal sites. So I think it is an issue, and like I said earlier, I think it's, yes, sure, there have been attempts to try and bring down this service, but I still think it's remarkable how quickly, given that this complaint was filed a few weeks ago and the content's already been deleted. So I think that's a very successful strategy because they've all come together to try and solve the issue.
Right, interesting. Now, Professor, I'd like to ask you one more. Noonoo TV could pose risks not just to content providers, but also, of course, to the users, for many reasons. For example, they don't have any age limit system, nor they have this protection over the personal information of users, right? Could you elaborate more on the harms these illegal streaming services could have on individuals?
Right, so when you access a series like The Glory on Netflix, for example, example, it's an 18-rated series. So in order to be able to watch that content, you have to verify your age. Often it's through your mobile phone. It's quite a simple process, but it's very sophisticated and it's difficult to bypass. So the thing is with illegal sites, they don't do that. It's essentially you go on the website and you can just watch whatever you want because the objective is to generate as much money through advertising, so that there is no regulation there. It's basically the wild west of streaming. And so, yeah, there are issues. Now, in terms of age-related or age-restricted content, actually, there are currently measures in place to try and make it easier because there's so much content out there. So basically, streaming services will be able to kind of self-regulate, so to speak. They'll be able to put ratings on themselves to try and speed up the process in which content is available on their streaming services. But that's closely being watched by the government. The thing is with these legal streaming sites is that there is no regulation whatsoever. So this is another issue. And there's they're advertising gambling websites, and so for younger viewers that is a problem. So this is something that also needs to be tackled.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Ha, the AVP has filed a complaint against Noonoo TV, and upon receiving the complaint, the Busan Metropolitan Police Agency launched an investigation into the pirate streaming site. Are there any other cases where illegal streaming sites were ordered to compensate original providers?
Yeah, as you know, a word of compensation is a matter of civil litigation, not a criminal issue. And allowed streaming of copyrighted works constitutes an infringement on public transmission right that is granted to copyright holders under Copyright Act. Against the infringement of copyright holders' transmission right, civil damages can be awarded according to Copyright Act Article 125. Especially in the case of illegal internet streaming, the damages equivalent to lost monetization opportunities for the copyright holder might be huge. The most frequently referenced court case regarding illegal streaming websites is the Soribada case. Soribada was an internet website that applied technical measures to allow and facilitate its users to copy and transmit large number of musical works to each other on a peer-to-peer basis without any consent from the copyright holders. So a bundle of copyright holders filed a civil suit for the damages. After a number of court hearings, the court held the operator of Soribada liable for aiding and abetting the illegal streaming behavior. Eventually, the court made a prevailing judgment for the plaintiffs, and the awarded damages were around $20,000. But it's not a big monetary compensation, but this case is regarded as a sort of landmark cases in Korean legal history.
Right. Now, Mr. Ha, since the investigation is going on, I'd like to ask you this. According to Noonoo TV, the platform had accumulated more than 1.5 billion views for its video content as of February 3rd. The number, is larger than the figures for local streaming platforms. With the investigation going on, could users also be punished?
It may not be easy to criminalize someone for just watching a show on a legal streaming website. This is because there is still no specific criminalizing provision under Copyright Act. However, it is notable that if someone shares a URL link to an illegal streaming website to another people, he or she might be guilty of copyright infringement. According to the original cases, just providing a link to an illegal streaming site does not constitute copyright infringement because it merely indicates the location or path of the web page and does not transmit the copyrighted works themselves. But in September 21, the Supreme Court of Korea changed the original judgment, stating that sharing a link to an illegal streaming website with knowledge of illegality constitute an act of aiding and abetting copyright infringement. It was an historical transition that made a huge impact on content's business industry. According to the court decision, if someone goes beyond just watching the shows and shares a link of Noonoo TV's URL to another people, he or she would be subject to criminal penalties. And now there is also kind of legislative actions to amend the Copyright Act to include the criminalizing provision against illegal link sharing.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Heo, one more question to you. Meanwhile, to prevent more cases of illegal streaming services, a lawmaker proposed this amendment to the Information and Communications Network Act. What is this amendment about, and is this going to be effective if it does pass the National Assembly?
Yeah, as mentioned earlier, administrative actions to require internet service providers to install blocking equipment into overseas gateway networks are not enough to fully control over these kind of criminal behaviors because they have already opened cache servers in Korea and replicate URLs of illegal sites on that domestic servers. The ISP's blocking measures did not work effectively. Therefore, CDNs, the cache server operators, as well as ISPs, also needs to be obligated by law to block access to the cloned illegal websites. So now, considering the technical limitation of existing measures as of today, a lawmaker proposed an amendment of related law named the Act of Promotion of Information and Communications Network Utilization and Protection, so-called Network Act. The proposed amendment entails a provision to impose legal obligations on CDNs to crack down the illegal streaming websites. If this legislation passes, it is expected that the government will have more controlling power over a significant number of illegal websites, at least within the boundaries of current technology level.
Right, I see. Now, Professor, completely uprooting such illegal services is, of course, very much important. But what, in my opinion, what matters is civic consciousness and awareness that steers viewers away from such illegal streaming sites. And what should people know? And how can these kinds of values be instilled in people concerning copyright infringement and pirated content sites?
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one. I think there needs to be a campaign to really kind of, I guess, educate people in terms of how damaging piracy can be. I think there's a misconception that these companies have lots of money. It's okay to kind of download and content illegally because they're fine. They're making tons of money anyway. But if you're saying, well, actually, it's affecting the content that we watch because they're not able to produce as much content, or they're not able to produce as much quality content because they don't have the money, or they're not willing to make the risks because they're losing money elsewhere because of piracy. Now, sure, yes, there needs to be an effort by the government, by the authorities, and by the streaming platforms themselves to try and solve this problem. But I think, yes, there needs to be an effort or an endeavor to try and educate and to try and promote, content and downloading it through legal channels. As an educator myself, I tell my students that you must access your content legally because, and I tell them politely that that's really, it's a really important thing to do. And I don't download content illegally. So, it's something that I try and champion myself. And I think I can understand, the temptation, but I do think there's a misconception out there. Either you've got these big, powerful conglomerates, these companies are making lots of money anyway. Sure, that may be the case, but at the same time, you need to think about the content providers, the directors, the producers, the writers, the staff, and it also affects them. So I think it's, I don't know whether that's through YouTube videos, or whatever it may be, but I think there needs to be an effort, and perhaps in collaboration between the companies and the government to try and educate those that that it is important to watch content legally.
Right. I mean, people do really have to recognize that they might not be able to watch content such as The Glory, right? If they continue seeing these kind of things.
Yeah, exactly.
So
so Squid Game, Parasite, sure, they're produced by these big, powerful companies, but it's important that we support the industry, we support the Korean industry, and we do that by watching content legally.
Right. Now, Professor, Noonoo TV eventually deleted hundreds of Korean dramas, movies from their website, but there always could be other, illegal streaming websites like this. And what countermeasures does the government need to come up with to effectively protect the rights of copyright owners?
Well, I think Yeah, it's about sending a message, you know, that there will be repercussions, legal repercussions if you do put up content online. You know, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really talk about the legalities, but there needs to be a deterrent. You know, it needs to be made absolutely clear that you're not going to get away with putting up a website and just essentially stealing content from streaming platforms and enabling people to watch it, you know, for free. There needs to be a message that goes out that that's not acceptable. You know, you're always going to have, you know, bad players out there. That's unfortunately the nature of the world we live in. But I think if we can have a strong enough deterrent and also an effort made to try and educate as many people as possible to watch content legally, I think those are steps in the right direction.
Right, we would need to have strong deterrent, right? Now, I'd like to ask more questions to our experts, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. But thank you, Professor, and of course, thank you, Mr. Heo, for letting us dig deeper into the issue. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be next Monday with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the weekend. Goodbye.